I'm going to go ahead and say it right out of the gate. This went on for so long, I really thought about splitting it into two parts. But then a different part of my brain, which is either more rational or less rational, said, nobody's going to watch this thing all the way through, so just make it all in one. So here's the leaderboard for those of you following along. Since round 3, this is round 4. We've got the same stuff from the end of video 3. And this time around I thought we'll do some proper crawler content. But I'm not going to try to follow any legitimate rules because I don't really know what they are. So I put out my cut up tennis balls in the ravine, and it just happened to turn out to be 12 gates. And I put those 12 gates primarily on the side hill portion, which has not been laid down very long. So it's not super set in place. The trucks are heavy enough and they push enough traction that they can knock this stuff over. So once we get past through the gates here, I'll run through my own bonkers methods of scoring for this, and then we'll get into the runs. Right out of the box, instead of 1 point, a reverse is 2 points. Passing a clean gate takes off 10. Touching a gate takes off 7 or plus 3. Striking a gate is 5 or minus 5. Flipping it over is plus 10. So a perfect run is minus 120. So lower scores are better, if that makes any sense. And then we get right into it. First on the course is Zoidberg, because he was leading the scores from last week. Gate 1 is basically a gimme, as is Gate 2, because something about this has to be a little bit easy. Once we get to, if memory serves, Gate 4, stuff starts getting really messed up. It's already noisy in the audio, which is why the audio has been cut off of this. It was the noisiest morning that I can possibly think of, including a point on maybe the second or third run. I'll have to throw a little segment of audio in, I won't cut it out, where you can hear the search and rescue helicopter hover over my house for about 45 seconds because it's going to some sort of event at the local school, and it was one of the top 5 loudest things I've ever heard in my life. Anyway, back to this. Zoidberg doing pretty well, mostly thanks to four-wheel steer. I almost always forget that this vehicle has dig, which would probably have been handy at a couple points here, and if I had any sense in my head at all, I would take that little Sharpie and put some numbers on the tennis balls instead of just arrows, so that I could remember what gates I've passed through when I'm going back through and editing this. Because I think on the first couple runs, I had to go through this a dozen times because I would either miss a gate or count a gate twice. And I just did what I call recoveries as the opposite of clearing a gate. So a clean gate is minus 10, and a recovery is plus 10. Because there had to be some sort of penalty. Like, I was also thinking about doing like a bonus points for quickest through, but I just couldn't. I couldn't figure out what was going on. The driving it was difficult enough, and then trying to go back and comb through the footage and remember what happened where. The first, I have 3 of the 8 runs done here in the single take via what I would call a body cam. And I genuinely would have preferred to do it this way because it's just quicker and easier. But this is early, and as you see, getting here out into the sun. Once the sun broke free of those trees, the shadows were so severe, the camera just couldn't keep up with it. So Zoidberg, not a blistering run, but it doesn't matter. This is my first event that's not timed. So he finishes the 12 gates with a score of -76, which I guess would be +44 if we were scoring this like a normal person. And Jolly Green is up second. One of the great parts about this is running all the rigs so in such close proximity to one another. I had no idea what the scores were until I sat down to edit through all of the footage, because I couldn't remember what gates got hit. I couldn't remember what gates got cleaned. I couldn't remember how many times each rig rolled over. It was like I was watching it for the first time. Jolly Green doing his best here, and his center of gravity improved dramatically when he lost the defender body, but he's still not, well, he's not really 100% dialed in, because I didn't really make any changes to the setup other than shortening the wheelbase to fit the new body and sticking the new body on it. So Jolly Green has some tweaking that needs to be done. I'm so thankful that anyone watching this doesn't have to listen to the audio playback that I listen to in the edit, because I can count 4 dogs just having a conversation. Anyway, Jolly Green seems to be navigating this side hill by a method of just getting to a gate, falling off the hill, resetting, and then moving on to the next gate. Because is that four rollovers? 4 or 5 rollovers? Which is not surprising. Once again, the camera, as it doesn't show that third dimension, it doesn't really transmit how steep this is sideways. And I think it does transmit pretty well that it's very rough. And I wish I could do a better job of avoiding those gates, but Jolly Green, for having a good amount of steering angle, has quite a bit of push. I guess the overall weight hurts his steering response a bit. I think the tires do pretty well. I'm really happy with those J-Concept Scorpios. They look good. They've got a good amount of traction. They have decent sidewall grip, but there's a lot being asked of them. Even after the weight loss, this truck is just over 9 pounds, which still puts it up at the heaviest in the fleet by, I think Daphne is second at like 7 3/4, so he's got almost 1.5 pounds over the next heaviest. I've been debating swapping out the 2-speed for a single speed from a Sport, as the 3300 kV motor in there is entirely too much. It's just too much. Second gear is basically unusable. I think Jolly Green will probably do 11 or 12 miles an hour in first gear, which is too much for a crawler. That's too much for a trail truck. But even throwing in all those reverses and falling off the hill half a dozen times, he finishes the course with a minus 59, which for at least this moment is second place. That moves us to third on the leaderboard, so third on the course, Daphne, and the old-time move that camera style as the brightness is getting absurd out here. It's the end of October, and this is about 8:30 in the morning, and it's about 80 degrees. So if winter's coming, it's doing it gradually. Daphne taking great advantage of having the longest travel suspension of the group, made particularly quick work out of those first 4 gates, coming to what is the first really tricky part, coming over that crest. I think this part right here, first reverse, I think only 2 or 3 competitors didn't roll at that point, trying to find a transfer spot, something flat to get a front wheel on. She makes it a little farther and rolls off in a spot that I'm not sure anyone else rolled off there except maybe Ironsides, who that's a whole different story. If you make it that far, that's a whole different thing. It's such slow going. I didn't realize it as it was unfolding, how slowly I had to take all of this just to keep them on the side of the hill. I think this is probably, I would say, around 40 degrees. And in most of the testing I've done, as almost everything here has portals, 45 degrees of side hill is about the functional limit. And if a tire drops off of a higher point into a lower point, suddenly part of the truck is beyond 45 degrees, and you get a nice quick tumble down and off. I couldn't do anything about, like, in a proper, I'm making air quotes, in a proper competition, if you roll and land on your wheels, that doesn't count as a rollover. I just had to count what I called recoveries, like that, because the positioning of this side hill, there being a 4-inch tall corrugated pipe up against a cinder block, even if a rig rolled all the way off and landed on its wheels, that's foreshadowing. There was no way for it to get back up. I've tried to breach those pipes, and even if we're not talking about getting up over the sheer face of a cinder block, and then some of them have 4 to 5 inches of concrete on top of that, without a winch, at least nothing I own is getting up over that. And Daphne finishes with a minus 61, which moves her into second, at least for the moment. And in fourth and up fourth is Blue Sky High, who I do remember wondering how he would fare at this, having one of the higher centers of gravity, but having a pretty short wheelbase, and he's nice and wide. Oh, here we go. So let's see how well the microphone picks this up. It's still pretty distant at the moment. I am kind of curious as to how loud this is going to get as it gets closer. There we go. So it's just doing a flyby over my house, and I got a nice clean audio clip of it because it was so startling. I remember just walking away from the course with the truck just sitting there in between gates. So I got a nice couple clean seconds of helicopter hovering with no other movement going on. I'm not following the numbers perhaps as well as I should be. I had to go through and put them in. Blue Sky High is doing well. I think he's got the highest score at this around the midway point and falls off. It seems like everybody fell off kind of there in the gate 6, 7, 8 at least once. There's so many pitfalls, it seems like I just couldn't remember where they all were. If you were to ask me right now to go out and mark those gates in the same spots that they were before, that would be impossible. I have no recollection of where those gates are. This editing could have been a lot tighter. I could have shaved easily 40 seconds off of this video. Another gate touch. This section right here was the bane of my existence, but I'd already run it several times and I wasn't going to realign the course. I thought, oh, won't it be funny to have a nice, properly sideways point right there, and it's really difficult to get by. This seems almost like an episode in futility here, and it took me a number of runs with a number of rigs before I finally started to figure out how to better tackle that, and that did indeed benefit the bottom 4 on the standings, because, as I like to put it, they get to watch the first 4. I'm genuinely recording this while watching the scoring to make sure I caught the reverses and the touches and the rollovers. Is he gonna make it there? Oh no, I caught that one. Okay. And just barely manages to get through there in a minus 83, which shoots him up into the lead for the moment. We're past halfway, so if you've made it this far, congratulations. There's better stuff to come, and there's some of the much worse stuff to come. I'll go just beyond foreshadowing and tell you that Colonel Mustard did not have a good day. That right there is the start of a bad day. Manages to get out of it. And did I... Oh, I did get him for the reverse. I couldn't remember. And, okay, he did get the gate strike. Alright. I can't remember what happened at all. It's genuinely blurring together. The recording method I attacked this time is I just carried each individual rig out from my workshop, did the run, took them in and packed them up. One rig got recorded out of order. You'll see that at the end. ReMuTation actually ran the course third, because at the time of this filming, Zoidberg and ReMuTation are the only 2 rigs sharing a radio. So they got carted out together so I could get that one radio done and then not have to deal with it again. And then I just went back to the rest. So I did 3 with the body cam, and then the other 5 this style with the move in the camera. There's a real surround sound thing going on with that helicopter right now. I thought it was gone. I can hear the loudspeaker from the school. It doesn't sound like it's real. Colonel Mustard is moving along so gradually, and surprisingly his tires do well, but it's just so much high weight. This is usually where people fall off. Let's see how he does. I genuinely have no recollection. It's like I'm watching this for the first time, and I've gone through it to do the edits and add the text so many times. This has taken days. Not that I don't know, begging for forgiveness. There he goes. That's a little later. He made it through the earlier portion where rigs have fallen off. Fell off just before, what is that, gate 8? Gate 9. Fell off between 8 and 9. I'm going to try to keep a mental log of that for the remaining 3. And this is the section between 9 and 10, which I talked about a little bit earlier, that, I mean, make it difficult, but the placement of that lower gate marker, there's nowhere to go. He's going to try the go around from the top, and I was just generous, and like, he didn't get all 4 wheels inside that gate, so that should technically be, I don't know, is that a non-pass? But like I said, I move the rocks, I make the rules, so I gave him the 10, because I could just tell, I think he might have hit every gate to finish with that minus 49. But he gets us into the home stretch. Yella, who by all rights should be placed higher, but just had an abysmal week and made up for it a bit the following week, and is coming out hungry because this is his territory. This is his terrain. He's straight axle, but he mostly has enough clearance to make it through most of this stuff. His tires, I would still say, are imperfect, but if there's one praise that you can give to the Ecto, it's that it's not as finicky about tires as some rigs are. I've tried numerous tires. I think Jolly Green has tried almost every set of tires that's here. And changing from one to another might make it incrementally better. It might make it a little bit worse. But you land on one and you stick with it. The Pitbull Growlers that are on Daphne were one of the first sets I bought for Jolly Green. And they worked okay. They were never super remarkable. And Daphne was on some Pitbull Mad Beasts, which are taller and narrower. And it was never really great. Like, it was okay. Then one day, just out of nowhere, I decided to put the Growlers on Daphne, and it was transformative. The handling became immediately improved, and by a lot. And then Jolly Green went on the Dirt Tracks Showdowns, the Louise Rowdies, that are now on Blue Sky High. So it's like a tire roundabout here. I don't know if it's tires break in and they get better and they move from one rig to another. I don't know what it is. But those are the stock MST tires that came on Blue Sky High and did not do well on Blue Sky High, but he's a good pound heavier than Yella, and Yella does just fine with these. The compound is a little hard. Yella could do with a little bit softer of a tire compound, something that grabs a little better, but Yella does remarkably well on tires that I thought would end up in a box, never to be used on a rig. And the random, well, not random, but I had a light bulb idea. Let's put the metal bead locks on the front and stick with the plastic bead locks on the back, and it really helped the weight distribution. That, combined with the overdrive, allows Yella to get up some grades just with brute force. Best save of the day right here. I wish I could give him a bonus point right there. Like, doesn't even count as a reverse in my mind because his wheels were never touching the ground. I mean, yeah, I had to use some reverse to flip it, but never went in reverse. So like I said, I move the rocks and make the rules. That doesn't count as a reverse. Little Yella smartly throwing a little loop-de-loop there to only use one reverse to get through the final marker, but does clip one at the bottom to finish with a minus 83, which, if you'll remember back, which I didn't when I was doing this, that's Blue Sky High score. So we have a potential tie for first. And when I grab that Traxxas, what do they call that thing? When I grab the TQI radio for old Ironsides, and that XL5 with the, it's got the fine control of a 16-pound sledgehammer. Like, I think I've compared it previously to an on-off switch. So when I get out on a course like this, it's surging. Like, trying to get smooth motion is almost impossible. And mind you, he's got hair buns, dollar store hair buns for foams. So the sidewall support is almost non-existent. So any points that Ironsides scores, I consider an absolute victory. I also, it must be pointed out that he's fallen off at this point, what, 3 or 4 times? I know through the whole thing he falls off probably around half a dozen times. Because like I said, maximum possible score would be 120. And right now he's at minus 120 and he's at minus 5. So at the halfway point. So he's fallen off 6 times? I wouldn't make this up because there would be no point. Every single time that thing fell off, it landed on its wheels. Every single time. Well, one time it didn't, but we'll get to that. Every time it fell off mid-course, it landed on its wheels. Like it has some sort of Traxxas patented righting mechanism to flip it back over. And there were parts like right there, entering gate 9, which was definitely a strike, if not a non-pass. I don't know how it didn't fall off right there. Like, I was waiting for it to fall off. It did, and it cleaned gate 10, and I think it might have been the only run. Maybe Blue Sky High cleaned gate 10 as well. His bumper completely stuck on a rock there. I thought I might be able to pull it off, but it did not happen. And even so, after all those drops and the highest possible center of gravity, no throttle control, Ironsides is sitting here at a minus 43. He's going to try the yellow loop. He unlocked the diffs, still throws one reverse, puts a nice big long reverse in. You can probably hear the clicks of the diffs locking and unlocking. They actually came in handy for once. It's not just a gimmick, ladies and gentlemen. It can be used. And there's the only time he didn't land on his wheels, but the course was already done. So he finishes with that minus 51. Then we plunge back into the darkness as the 8th run is actually the 2nd run of the day. ReMuTation, sharing a radio, so just got to get it done. I know it messes with the continuity, and do we really want to finish on this? Because I don't know what need be done to improve the overall handling. The torque twist is monumental. I mean, that body is sideways. And that body's so high up that it should be all but impossible for it to come into contact with the tires. But that rear axle right now, and rolls over before making it to gate 4. Definitely no other rig rolled over there. But I think what is the word I'm looking for? The faults are built too far into the system. They can't necessarily be corrected because they're part of what it is. I mean, I guess I could put shorter shocks on it and limit some of its travel. But even with four-wheel steer, trying to avoid a gate there, and finally just decided to just run it over. It's impossibly wide. It's too wide to go over any of the bridges. It's having a particularly tough time clearing gates. The servos are strong enough. I use them for steer. That's Blue Sky High steering servo. That's Yella steering servo. They all do remarkably well with those AGFRC. Are they 32 or 35 kilo? They work great. But even with two of them, the steering response, and not entirely the fault of the servo. Yeah, there's some big axle extensions on there to manage to get those truggy wheels on there. But even when it was pre-mutation and I had just put it in the cage, and it was running on some RC four-wheel drive rock crushers, if memory serves, it wasn't remarkably responsive steering wise. The Red Cat axles, I've tried the Everest axles, the Gen 7 axles. I had an ill-fated and short-lived time of experimentation with a Wendigo. I don't want to get into that. None of their axles give very much steering angle. Like, this thing with four-wheel steer can turn about as sharp of a radius as Lil Yellow with two-wheel steer. So not to be too negatively forecasting of the future, but in a fleet of 8, I'm not 100% sure that this particular rig has a long shelf life, if you get my drift. Unless we become unnecessarily attached to them. An RC car is just a collection of parts. Those wheels came from another vehicle. Half the stuff in it came from other vehicles. So it wouldn't be the biggest loss in the world if those parts made their way into other vehicles. So if Mutation was your underdog favorite, I do apologize, but this might be his curtain call, his final performance. Not a great one. He's at minus 40, having rolled over less than I had anticipated, but faulted most gates. Just listen to that body dragging. And just drives over the gate for a minus 47. So here's the running order with the scores. And they'll do a little flip around and we can see where the placings went. Blue Sky High and Lil Yella did indeed tie. Zoidberg close behind. Daphne did not do as well as I anticipated, just 2 points ahead of Jolly Green, who I think did as well as could be expected. And then the bottom 3, just an embarrassment. Aside from maybe Ironsides, who continues to surprise every now and again. Scoring for the round, pretty straightforward. This is only a 25-point day because it took so long, which moves Zoidberg a little further out into first. Jolly Green still holding on, clenching on to second. Blue Sky High and Daphne right behind. And Lil Yella, I think, is one good week away from being in the top 3. I would say the bottom 3 will probably remain the bottom 3. I think they've been all but eliminated on points at this juncture. We'll see what round 5 brings. I promised 7 rounds, and I think I'm going to stick to that. So that's where we sit for now. I have no idea what to do for the next round. So here in the 36th minute, I cannot believe this has gone 36 minutes. In the 36th minute of this, I'll ask anybody who's made it this far, whatever you want me to do for round 5, just mention it, and I'll see if I can get it done. I mean, my engagement's like 5 minutes, so nobody's going to answer that. But anyway, if you made it this far, I don't need to tell you to subscribe because you clearly already have. If you've made it this far, thank you so much, because I put so much work into these, and I feel like I'm investing chunks of my life, and I don't know why, but, you know, it makes me happy. So if it can make one other person happy, I would consider that a success. Anyhow, whatever comes next, whatever video's in between, I hope you check back in and watch that one. And I absolutely hope to see you in the next one. So I'll see you later.